Aloha world! I am so excited to be with you guys today talking about something that is really important to me, which is culture shock. I think helping people realize that there are stages of culture shock and that this is a normal thing that people go through when they're in a new environment is really important for people to know, because sometimes you start experiencing culture shock and you think, what is wrong with me? I'm in the wrong place. Like, you feel really stuck and really sometimes alone. And so this video is just to help you know that you're not alone, that this happens to almost everyone in slightly different ways when they are in a new environment. So I want to talk about the 4 stages of culture shock. There actually are 4 set stages, and certain sources have them a little different. In some there's 5, but there's kind of this process that a lot of us go through when we get into a new culture. So I'm going to share them and explain. Number 1 is the honeymoon stage. You get somewhere new and you're so excited. This is magical and it just all seems so new and exciting. When I got to New Zealand, I just felt like it was so beautiful. And I just felt like I was in this fairy tale, perfect land that was so beautiful. Or sometimes this is just interest. Like when I was in Kiribati for the first time, just driving down the road, I was like, this is so different than I've ever seen. This is really, really cool that I'm here right now. And it's like you're on your honeymoon, you're on an exciting new vacation, and everything is new and exciting and magical. So, yes, and just like the honeymoon phase in dating doesn't last forever, neither does the honeymoon phase in culture shock. Then we come to step 2, which is frustration. This is when you start realizing that things are really different and that you have to figure out how to live here, and this is really hard. And you realize that the food is different and the way people do everything is different, and it's just really hard. I remember being in the missionary training center in New Zealand, my first 2 weeks in New Zealand, and I love the New Zealand accent so much, and there was all these islanders with different accents, and it was really fun to be around them, but I just missed the American accent. And we would watch some of the church videos, and I loved to hear the American accents on the church videos, which I know that sounds so stupid, but it was something so small for me that I'd never been away from the American accent, and I was the only person really with the American accent in the MTC at that time. And so I was frustrated. I remember getting to Kiribati, and pretty soon I was like, it is so hot here. I can't survive in this hot weather. And it just felt hard. Another thing that we do during the frustration phase is to idealize our home. Suddenly, Nevada, middle of nowhere Nevada, became so perfect. Oh, if it were only like home. I just love my country. I love my home. And this happens for everyone. BYU students come from their countries, and suddenly they have so much pride in where they came from because they miss it. And that's a natural part of culture shock. The 3rd stage is adjustment. This is where you're realizing that you're not going to die, and you're slowly getting used to the New Zealand accent or whatever that you hear all the time. Suddenly, eventually, you don't even notice it. And that goes into step 4, which is adaptation. And so this is you're not back up on the same level of the honeymoon phase. It's not perfect, and you realize that every place has its own pros and cons. And you realize that your home had plenty of pros and cons, and that this new place has different pros and cons. And you gradually, over time, you become comfortable in the place that you're in, and in many cases, in my situation, you grow to really, really love it. And I've lived in Hawaii the longest out of places besides my home where I grew up, and I love Hawaii with all my heart. But there are also lots of pros and cons, which I shared in one of my last videos, and I think that that's really, really healthy. And I feel comfortable here. I am learning more and more. I know pretty much what to expect, and that's really good. There's one more thing I wanted to talk about, which is reverse culture shock. a lot of times when people are away from their home in a very different place for a long time, they come home and then they have culture shock to being back home. I don't know if it's because I'm left-handed or what, but when I was in New Zealand for a year and a half, I got really, really good at driving on the other side of the road. And when I came back home to America, it was actually harder to adjust back to driving at home than it had been to driving in New Zealand. And I remember coming back home to Nevada just recently before COVID, coming back to Nevada after being pretty much gone for a long time. And I just thought, I have to live here again? It's so dry, like there's no plants, nothing's green. Because I've been used to Hawaii and even like in Kiribati, the 2 summers, where it's just green. And so, of course, then I got used to it, and I was like, oh yeah, this is where I'm from. It's still beautiful. I love it here. But there always will be those pros and cons. And so I think that the best way to handle your culture shock is to give yourself time and realize that, like all places, the place that you're in right then is good and bad. And then another thing is just to get to work. Get busy. If you are sitting and moping and missing your home, you're missing also the unique things, the unique experiences that you're having right in front of you. My mom always said, revel in the uniqueness of the experience. And so instead of thinking, this is crazy, where am I, this is so hard, think, wow, look at me. I've never been in this situation before. This is really unique. And enjoy and appreciate that uniqueness. I hope that this has helped you in some way. If you are going through culture shock, or if you will be going through culture shock, thank you so much for watching. Please share below your own experiences with culture shock. And thank you, as always, for deciding to spend your time with me today.